Hello, I am Tracy Otsuka, your host. Welcome back to ADHD for Smartass Women. My mission to show you who you are and inspire you to be it. And after meeting thousands of ADHD women, I can say with confidence every single one is brilliant at something. There are no exceptions. So, of course, I am just delighted to introduce you to Mushin Lee. Mushin Lee studied at the University of Virginia and Rice University, but her real education came from following a winding path through anthropology, teaching, journalism, and now artificial intelligence. Today, she's building AI tools designed to reduce cognitive overload and help people focus on what actually matters. Mushin brings a neurodivergent lens to the future of tech, one that sees ADHD not as a barrier, but as a design blueprint. She believes the very things we're often told to tone down, intuition, creativity, nonlinear thinking, are exactly what the world needs more of, not less. She's also not just thinking about technology, she's thinking about attention, intention, and the emotional weight of living in a world that never stops spinning. A moment of synchronicity shifted how she understands focus, presence, and the deeper intelligence that lives in all of us. In this episode, she is answering a question we asked back in episode 328 of this podcast. What if your ADHD and intuition are clues, not problems, to how we're meant to move through the changing world? Welcome, Mushin. Did I get all of that right?
Tracy, you always get these things right, and I'm so happy to be on the show with you.
Yeah, well, I am delighted to have you. I was really excited actually when, I get the information on who's going to be on this week, and I saw what we were going to talk about, and I thought, of course, how timely, right? But before we go there, what I always want to do is introduce you to our audience through your ADHD diagnoses. So, can we talk about that first?
Yeah, absolutely. And, actually, growing up, I had no suspicions that I had ADHD. Now that I know what the symptoms look like, there were breadcrumbs everywhere, especially when I hit puberty. That's when this precocious, bright, and fast talking young woman just hit depression so hard. And at the time, I'm 13, and I'm thinking, oh my God, my life is over because I am not aligned with who I truly want to be or what my authentic goals are. And I didn't realize maybe at that time there are things like hormones and ADHD and just brain chemistry affecting you and giving you those negative thoughts. So it actually wasn't until I had already gotten into business school and started having all these team meetings that I started noticing something was really weird. I just couldn't keep up. I couldn't pay attention even if I wanted to. I'd be in a team meeting and, this is an environment with no textbooks. There's no really preparation because people may or may not send out an agenda. It just depends on how organized you are. I had no idea up until that point. I had been basically relying on self-study and learning from textbooks. Lectures are like way over my head. So now I'm in this environment where a vast majority of your work is being able to focus during the meetings, during this like chaotic environment where people are talking over each other. It's not linear and it's not organized, and having to keep up with all that information. And it just got worse when I got into the corporate world because that was that kind of chaos multiplied by how many other cross-functional teams you have to work with and how many internal business processes you have to learn on the fly. How many people know processes are only just stored in their head and it's never documented, and so you can't really onboard until you go through it. And that's when I really started feeling like I was struggling with something unique because I had by that point noticed that people who were my peers seemed to be okay. I mean, we're dealing with the same problems and projects, but they seem to not be as bothered by it as much as I was. And I was starting to wonder maybe there was something about me. And that's when I started finding hacks on productivity, paying attention. And I'm sure this happened to a lot of people. You find yourself naturally reading about ADHD symptoms and tips and how to get over certain things. You're like nodding along going, oh my God, this is me. But honestly, for a while, I did not even seek diagnosis because I figured, well, I've hit this point in my life where I've got 2 degrees, I'm working in a 9 to 5, and I have a stable life. Like I've managed to figure out what works for me and develop all these systems and ways to get around things. Like I should be fine. But it was when we started seriously talking about whether or not we wanted to become parents that I really wanted to know. Because I knew there was a really strong chance that if the mother has ADHD, that the child does too. And that's just what really drove me to actually get the formal diagnosis. I felt fine as a person before, but I think it was just this additional complexity of wondering, how do you raise a child with ADHD? And, was that a thing that we need to consider if we wanted to have children? That's really what took me into the therapist's room and start doing the diagnosis. And when she gave me back my score, it was like in the high 80s, which apparently was 2 standard deviations higher than the average prediction level for average ADHD. So I'm like, yeah, I totally have it. But yeah, throughout my entire life, I just didn't even realize that was something I was dealing with. I knew for sure depression was something I was dealing with, and having ADHD and depression at the same time is not a fun combo. I don't know if people without ADHD understand this feeling that when we're bored, it's literally physically painful. It's like trying to hold your breath or suck in your stomach all day long, kind of painful. And depression at the same time is like, oh, well, nothing's interesting. And your ADHD brain is like, wait, what? Like, I can't do this, right? And so, I've really mainly focused on trying to get my life aligned to whatever values, and I was trying to understand and finding the right career path for myself, as you can see from all the different roles and different professions I've explored during my time. But, it wasn't until later that I started looking into ADHD and found resources like yours. So I started recognizing that more in myself. And yeah, so here I am.
It's a standard story. We hear a lot, yet a lot of clinicians still don't recognize it as ADHD because I suspect you always did well in school.
With a lot of effort, it was just truly, purely grinding through it. I mean, I didn't enjoy school. I know some people do, even when they do have ADHD. For me, though, curriculum-based learning is just not my forte. I much rather create projects and go after things I'm interested in. I will deep dive and study the heck out of something I find really interesting and actually useful. But this kind of curriculum rote-based learning where you're teaching a whole bunch of subjects as if they're completely compartmentalized and not connected, and it's not being driven by your own innate curiosity, it was just terrible. But you had to get through it, right? Like, how are you going to get through life without a degree? So, yeah, just brute force. Yes, it was just absolute brute force.
Did you find that what ended up happening is you'd go to lectures because you had to be there,
Yeah.
but you ended up teaching yourself because the way they were teaching made no sense?
Yeah, or it's not the right pace. Or I found this really annoying too when they'll bring up something that you find interesting, but they've moved on to something else. And you're like, but now I have this need in me.
So I can't focus on anything you say after that, right?
Exactly. Can we rewind that? Yeah, it doesn't support that kind of learning environment. And I feel like education is definitely a place where AI could be really useful. I'm sure I'm not the only person who feels this way about education in general. And there's so much more potential for self-guided learning. And when you have the AI be your like co-coach, but the teachers still matter. There's this human element that is social and important, and it's still really important to have real teachers. It's just that I don't know about the whole part where I'm gaining knowledge part is happening in the classroom. I don't think it ever was for me.
Yeah, exactly. You also mentioned depression, and you mentioned it twice. I'm curious, once you were diagnosed, was there any thought that maybe what underlied the depression was actually the ADHD, or have you concluded that they're actually comorbid?
At least for me, I think it was slightly a bit of both. For sure, after I got diagnosed, and I've been one of the lucky ones who tried out only maybe 3 or 4 medications, and I'm on something that helps a lot with especially the lack of interest at certain tasks at work. That part of ADHD is really difficult to grapple with. And it's helped a lot in terms of helping me focus. But I think I still had slight other symptoms of depression on top of that as well, that I also had to seek out some support for on top of it. And it's difficult to tease that out because there is so much that can cause you to feel depressed about having ADHD, and just managing ADHD day to day can be so exhausting. I do believe that there are definitely gifts here, but for sure, the downsides of it, if you don't manage it, is just kind of chaotic and exhausting and terrible. I would end up at the end of a week feeling absolutely exhausted. And I couldn't understand why. I'm a perfectly healthy woman in her 30s who is just having a normal 9 to 5 work, not like startle crazy hours. We don't even have kids. my life is not that complicated. I shouldn't be this tired. And yet I was just so exhausted. All I could do was just lay on the couch. And ever since I've become more aware, I've given myself a lot more self-care and the additional medication to help boost all those effects. Like I don't have those days anymore. And I even have like energy to pursue projects that I've been hoping to do for years and years. Yeah.
But do you think, Mushin, that is because during those periods where you were so exhausted all the time, you were actually doing work that wasn't intentional? It wasn't who you are and who you wanted to be more of. It was not that interesting.
Yeah, yeah, that is so painful, right? It's frustrating because I've taken so many early risks in my career intentionally trying to figure out what fits for me. And, I even tell a career coach a while back, like, I don't think there are any jobs for me. And I'm still kind of leaning towards that even now, even after I've spent more time trying to figure out, am I even in the right career now in product management? I thought I wanted this. And then the reality of what it actually is as a product manager, I could go into a whole separate episode about that. Reach out to me if you're curious. And now that I'm building my own side projects as an I hate to call myself a founder because I haven't even launched anything, but just the amount of freedom and control and the how well synced you are with what you're doing and what you feel like is the right thing to do. And sometimes you're just following your intuition. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You don't have to whip out a deck or do all this analysis and try to prove to 12 different stakeholders that we should do this thing and then have your vision diluted in the process just to launch something that looks, half formed compared to what you feel like we could have done instead. All that is just not a problem when you're doing your own thing. So yeah, it definitely is different work. Absolutely.
And I want to say, Mushin, you are a founder. You need to call yourself a founder because we can't change our life if we don't change our identity, right? So you need to identify with that because then it's like it's done, you're it. So was there any relief with the diagnoses, or were you one of the women who was actually it made you more anxious and depressed initially?
Kind of neither. When I got the diagnosis, I wasn't actually totally surprised. I was like, oh yeah, I kind of had a feeling I would get a, yes, you have ADHD. I was a little surprised by the score. I'm like, 2 whole standard deviations higher than average? Holy crap. But what really did start changing for me happened in very small doses. Like before, I would try to diagnose what is going on with me today. Like, why do I feel tired or miserable? And in my head is like a stacked rank list of factors. Mostly bad sleep is at the very top of it. Oh, maybe I didn't work out. Maybe I didn't do all these regular self-care things that you always had to do. And somewhere near like number 5 to 8 to 10 on that list was ADHD. But then afterwards, after diagnosis, that kind of pushed ADHD up to the top 3 of the list and recognizing that, hey, it's maybe just the way your brain is. And understanding that just kind of helped me help myself in a lot of ways, because there will be days where, hey, I'm a woman, right? Like we have rise and falls, and there are times in our months where nothing is just happening. And I just have to learn to give myself that grace. Like, look, you might think you can plow through this day and hit all the things on your calendar, but given that you have the body you have and the brain that you have, maybe we slack off a little bit and it will be fine. And so I think it helped me adjust how I was approaching these things where I was trying to take care of myself. And I do think, though, that something that was different was I didn't necessarily embrace it right away, even though I knew it was nothing to be ashamed of. But what had changed was one of my career coaches learning that I had ADHD, and she was like, I had no idea. And she felt so inspired by that she encouraged me to share my journey more publicly. And after I kind of debated about it, eventually, I went out on LinkedIn and was like, I all have ADHD. And I realized that I could actually embrace it and that I did have superpowers. And when I looked back at my life at certain moments that stuck out, I was like, how did I do that? And I was like, I'm pretty sure ADHD has something to do with that. And it took a while, but when I found more and more people like that who were willing to embrace their neurodiversity and just really calling that out as like, oh my God, this is something that we can own for ourselves. It's weird to say that I'm proud of, but it's something I like to own. I'm not afraid to talk about it. Like I'll even tell people sometimes just by accident that, oh yeah, so I have ADHD, so I have organization issues, which is why I'm building this AI to help with organization. And it's just not a thing that I think twice about anymore.
I love that. Okay, so I need to ask this question because I am seeing you on the other side of the screen, and the energy is just popping off. And I am half Japanese, and I will tell you that often in rooms, especially with, I would say, other Asian people, it's almost like I have so much energy, they don't know what to do with me because I don't act like a typical Asian woman, you know? I'm very bold, I can be confrontational, I'm loud, I'm all of the things that we are socially conditioned not to be. And I can feel that same energy from you. And so I am really curious what your experience is.
Oh man, yeah, that is so true, isn't it? I'm lucky in that my mom, she has always been this very like bright personality, high energy. She still has way more energy than even I do, and she looks like she never ages. And I feel like for me, that was just always a thing that I could be. And she was always like this go getter, very entrepreneurial. There's this Chinese phrase where her neighbors would describe her as very niu, and it means like ox, like very like strong and like full of energy and like bold. And I was like, yes, that's it. She's very new. And I guess I just never felt like that was something that I couldn't be if I wanted to. So when it came to wanting to go to business school or trying anything, it wasn't ever in my mind that, oh, I'm a girl, I can't do that. But I do know what you mean about feeling like you're too much for your environment. Let's just say right now I work in a pretty corporate environment. It wasn't what I originally thought I was going to get, but here I am. And so you do kind of feel as if the environment is telling you that you're off, even though you're not doing anything to hurt anyone. I never intentionally try to provoke anybody. When I get excited, I get loud, and I might be more direct than other people in that I will just say what is on my mind without intentionally trying to hurt anybody. But apparently that's not correct corporate speak in some way. And that, I don't know, there are these really small hidden rules about certain social environments that I just decided, okay, well, that's just not a good fit for me. And it's partly kind of relates to how I thought about whether or not it was going to come out on ADHD, is knowing that this is probably going to alienate some people. Like, not everybody's going to accept this. But I realized I don't necessarily want to hang out in those circles anyway, so it's fine. Like, I don't need a huge group of people for everybody to accept me. That'd be boring as heck. There's no single person who's acceptable everywhere. And there's also this additional expectation from the rest of the world about who you are as an Asian woman, right? Like, we're either wallflowers or we're dragon ladies. We're not allowed to be like our own complex human beings. Like, okay, thanks. So, and we could talk about the bamboo ceiling and tech and leadership and stuff like that too. Yeah, those additional perceptions can be.
I have never heard that phrase before. The bamboo ceiling. And so that's men and women?
Yes, men and women. Yes. Yeah, or that being Asian can have a negative effect on your career trajectory when it comes to laddering up on higher level positions. And they even found that the bamboo ceiling effect is actually more detrimental to your career than the glass ceiling effect for like women in general. I didn't dig too deep into these articles. I mean, one, I was getting upset, and it might have been several years ago. So, I'm only quoting something that may have gotten a little better later on. But it is something that I became aware of after another coach. She focuses a lot on executive presence, and she's also an Asian woman. And she talked about her experiences of how she had to learn to stand out in the room. She's like, go ahead and wear that crazy looking scarf or those earrings and act like you belong in that room. And do these things because you stand out anyway. You might as well own it. And know that you are going to have to work a little harder at being accepted by the in-group who may or may not look like you. And that's a natural human thing, right? Like, we're just going to be more naturally comfortable with people who are like us. And so you're going to have to be that person who takes that first step to try and like break down that barrier and be like, hey, I'm a human being like you. And, yeah, we have cultural differences. Doesn't mean that we can't like each other. We can't work together, right? That's as far as I've gotten down that rabbit hole with the bamboo ceiling. But it is, I believe it's still a real thing, unfortunately. I will say that it does seem like the environment matters a lot if you're in a place, in an area that probably generally supports people like you, and you see leaders like yourself in those type of companies and those type of roles, you're probably more likely to just advance in that environment simply because the environment's already proven to you that it is supportive of people like you by putting you in those positions. So anyway, it's pick your environments very carefully. And I think people with ADHD might appreciate this. People with high agency who can just like get into any situation, figure it all out. I don't care how hard it is, I could do this. One downside about that is that you may put yourself into a situation where the degree of influence you have, yes, is to whatever influence you can give as an individual contributor. But there's all these other factors that you don't control that's just going to make your life harder. So pick your battles wisely. You know, you don't have to go gung ho and you don't have to be perfect at everything. And maybe just go like, you know what? I'm just going to put myself in situations where I'm more likely to thrive.
Absolutely, absolutely. I can totally see though that just when you think of just the idea that like in media and movies and what do you call like these Netflix series, when there is someone Asian and they're in a work environment and it's tech, there's almost this idea that okay, they are the worker bees, but they're not in management. You know what I mean?
You're not strategic. And it's like, okay, excuse me, what does strategic even mean? You're just saying that does this thing have ROI? Does it break even? Does it make money? Is it profitable? Cool. We've done the analysis. Now we got to get the work done. And there's so many people who, unfortunately, are probably in leadership roles who don't know even how to get the work done, and they're just causing chaos and mess for everybody else, which I think is unfortunate. I think that the people who are worker bees and are doing the execution, they're the ones who understand your processes. They're the ones who actually see the opportunities for growth, for optimization, because they actually have that real world knowledge. And to just classify somebody as just worker bee, oh, they'll never be in management, like maybe give them a chance. Maybe is it like an introversion versus extroversion thing? I know for sure, like, hey, as Asians, we're modest to a fault. Like in America, you gotta be loud, you gotta brand yourself, you gotta be on LinkedIn and write all your content. And it's like, if you're an Asian person, that just looks so crass, you know, and you're not going to be that person who normally takes those type of actions. But unfortunately, given where we are in Western society, that's just something you kind of have to do to try to advocate for yourself.
In fact, I think as kids, we are constantly taught to diminish ourselves. And so, especially as women, right? If you're a woman and you're Asian and you have ADHD, I think the chances of that perfectionism problem forming and never feeling like you've done enough, like it all kind of convenes.
Oh man, that is so hard. You know, I know a lot of Indian female professionals who seem to, for some reason, I see them all over my LinkedIn all the time because they're going so hard at trying to advance in their careers. But at the same time, I've also met some very similar women who decided to quit that rat race and they're like, I needed to figure out what I actually want for myself. Because I think you do start to have that mentality of that perfect career. Here's my timeline. Here's my roadmap of how I'm going to get to XYZ VP of Google, whatever. And you get so obsessed with that. Yet you probably don't take the time to actually check with yourself. Like, is this the life I even want? And especially with the Asian expectations, right? You're going to get into Harvard from the get-go when you're 5. Yeah.
Totally. I had a tiger mom and a tiger dad. So the tiger dad was Japanese, the tiger mom was German, and that combination.
How did you make it, Tracy? I would have to guess.
But I do. I still have a lot of that no matter what I do. It's never enough. And so with my kids, and I almost wonder, are we taught that because our parents don't want us to be disappointed? I don't know. But we never talked about successes. And I know that, even today, it kind of makes everybody, like my family, everybody around us uncomfortable. So nobody really talks about anything that to me is really valuable, in terms of what is it that you actually want? Are you doing the thing that really lights you up? And it's more, no, just do the thing that makes the most money. And then once you get there, don't talk about it.
Is that because people are miserable? I mean, but it's,
I don't know, rather than is that what you really want to do? But then, as far as, with my parents, I think there was the cultural pressure, but I don't feel like my parents actually put that pressure on me. I had other parents, my friends' parents, when I left the law, make comments to me like, I don't think you should do that. I think that's a mistake. Their parents would say that to me. This was not an Asian father, by the way. But my parents never put that kind of pressure on me. So, the positive end of it is I think that they felt like no matter what I did, I was going to be successful at it if I really loved it. And then part of it too was I think they just gave up. Like they probably in their mind thought, what the hell is she doing
we
now?
can't rein this in.
They never once questioned, are you sure that's the right thing to do? So, we're raised with these certain expectations, but, the practical reality of it was, okay, once I got there, once they knew, okay, she got through law school, she's a practicing lawyer, I think the rest, they just kind of, okay, it's up to her now.
Yeah, that's interesting. You mentioned all that. And maybe part of it is that your parents are now confident that you can actually make it. It's like, see, she had it in her all along. She knows what she's doing. And, well, okay, well, if she wants to do this other thing, I'm sure she'll be fine. She can always pivot back. Or I'm just thinking in terms of conservative Asian parentism of, I just want to make sure you're okay. You got your basic needs met. Because, yeah, I mean, pursuing a life as a starving artist is not glamorous or great.
Well, and doctor, dentist, lawyer,
Engineer, maybe.
is there anything else?
Not sure. I've tried librarian once on my parents, and they're like, "Oh hell no!" I mean, they didn't say like that, but I get that anxiety. I feel like part of it might be fear of just the unknown too. Like even the professionals that are in my circle, where we're doing our career discovery and we're trying to figure out what's next for us. It turns out there is no roadmap, and every person's journey is going to look different because your needs are going to be different, and all this, and it's you going out there having to explore for yourself is not a skill we're really taught, and not really even the way of thinking that we're even raised with. Ever since you're a little kid, you were supposed to get on this like roadmap and be on this train towards going into college and having that job, right? And it's easy because you don't have to think about it. It's like this well-trodden path. Nobody's going to say that you did the wrong thing. But once you actually try to step off of that and try to find something that's authentic and unique to you, all of a sudden that's risky simply because nobody really knows what that looks like. But just because it's ambiguous and complex and that you don't know the answers, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't do it. Because I feel like it's kind of silly for you to get on a train that ends at a destination you don't want to go to. How about spending your actual life attempting to do the thing you want to do? I can't guarantee you'll get there, but that seems like a way better way to end up in a place you actually want to be than going on a train that's for sure going to take you where you don't want to be. But it's a fear thing, right? Like it's a lot of social pressure because you see everybody else doing it too, and Asian or not, and so people are just kind of afraid to break out of that mold and like go against that flow.
Absolutely. Okay, so this is a good segue. So you have said people with ADHD are built for the future of work. And I'd love to hear in your words, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, I mean, I see a lot of LinkedIn posts about AI taking over all our jobs. Well, what I can tell you about studying what little I know about machine learning algorithms, they do predictions. They are trained on a bunch of data, and then their job is just to predict what is the most likely output based on whatever new data you feed it. And it's just going to relearn that same pattern and be able to use that pattern, apply it. It's like an algorithm, right? I put it in this value, and it's supposed to spit out something at the end of it. And anything that is already routine, machine-like work, whether that's knowledge work, maybe it's just like processing numbers, and it's something that to a human is difficult to do because we don't calculate very well in our heads, but computers can do massive numbers of calculations all at once, all at the same time. Any of that kind of work is probably going to get automated, and if it hasn't already been. But machines don't necessarily do being a good human part. Like, it's not just empathy because, yeah, I sometimes chat with ChatGPT in the middle of the night as like a sub-therapist. But the thing is, even though I've been using AI a lot for both personal and professional reasons, I have found that there's still a gap. Like the AI only knows what it's been trained off of. Whatever data it's been able to absorb from the internet or your social media account, wherever they're stealing this data, I don't know. But it's not going to be able to capture all of the human experiences that you're having outside of your digital environment. So it can't even have access to the full breadth of your experience. Humans do. We feel things. We have neurons, and we have like these nervous systems that are constantly like, absorbing the information around us. And I think there's something about like somatic awareness where when you really stay connected and in tune with your body, there's like this wisdom that is just literally in your physical body. The AI does not necessarily have that. And so I've noticed a gap between when I've tried to work with my AI partner for insights versus when I have the same discussions with actual humans. Really the most interesting and surprising and like insightful thoughts came from people. The AI is giving me the most predictable and the most average output because that's how it's trained. Even if I ask it for something new and exotic or different, it probably will give me something, but it's not quite as connected, not quite as interesting as what people are telling me. So even as a product manager, I don't believe in the idea of creating synthetic humans and that you could talk to and try to validate with your product. For one thing, you're assuming that the AIs even had access to all that data to begin with to even be a representative human. But I think it's also that there might be something just about us as human beings that we just need other humans. But I'll get into more of like the job skills more specifically, because in product specifically, the hardest thing to do is figuring out what to build, because it's really not just about the data. I used to be a much more data-driven product manager, especially right out of the business school, and I ignored my intuition because I thought, well, that's just touchy-feely stuff. You can't quantify it, you can't put it on the business deck. And it turns out I've made some errors doing that. Like, there was one feature that I should have advocated for much, much earlier on, and it probably could have helped us hit our goals had I listened to my intuition that this is the piece that really mattered, because I had listened to somebody go through this experience, express like extreme frustration. And it was just one person, statistically insignificant. So I wrote it off, and yes, it was like a footnote, but really it stuck with me. And I should have listened to that harder, because all the other data and all these analytics that we did that helped to build our roadmap actually ended up being detractors. Years later, I look back at that project wondering what would have happened if had we built that other feature based on that one person's input a lot earlier. And I found out, like, oh my God, when we did actually build that one feature, it alone doubled our conversion rates by itself because I listened to somebody. And so there's something about your intuition that is still going to be valuable in the future, because there's so much about decision making that can't just be done through analysis alone. I mean, it's a bit of both. You kind of need data, and yeah, sure, you should probably get a grounded sense of where things are at, and AI can provide that for you. But in the future, the kind of work that I think human beings are going to have to do is going to lean a lot more into your creativity, your ability to collaborate with others, your ability to empathize with your users, speaking from a product role. That ability to like navigate the complexity of just the real world as a human being and finding those opportunities. It's not necessarily something that I think AI is built for.
So, what traits beyond intuition? And I think so much like, you hear people talking about intuition, and I used to myself think, oh, that's a bunch of woo woo, hippy dippy, whatever. But intuition is really just, it's facts that you've seen happen over and over again, right? That help build your intuition, and experiences, and probably data. What do you think about this? So I suspect that our intuition is like baby intuition as we're younger, but then it grows if you listen to it as you age, because you start dealing with the world and you learn that, oh, when I do this, this is what happens. When that person gave me that side-eyed glance, and I just kind of played it off like you're imagining things, and then later on I realized, oh, that actually was connected to my experience with that person. So don't you think so much of intuition is actually developed?
Yeah, I think that's possible. And I think that unfortunately it can be suppressed too. This reminds me of a post that I had seen randomly on Reddit, where they're discovering that this idea of you being left brain and right brain, that there's this part of your brain that's supposed to be creative, the other part that's logical. It's actually not how things work. It turns out it's all like one giant, integrated mess. And in our education system, what we're doing is just that we're pruning away these parts that don't fit our like mold of what we think is like this neat little logical order, and it's suppressing our ability to tap into that. I don't know how exactly to really describe intuition other than I feel it when you settle into yourself and you just try to connect with like the rest of your body and just listening to what that wisdom or inner sense is telling you. I'm not sure how you exactly could quantify it if you even wanted to test it out. Like, there's a part of me that wants to know, like, what could have happened if you did or did not listen to your intuition, and what is that? But yeah, I think what you said, though, makes a lot of sense. Like, you are this accumulated experience of all these things, and there's something that's just in your gut that's just telling you something, and you probably should lean into it because it's probably based on some actual experience. You might have a hard time knowing exactly what it is, not exactly like a clear fact, but there was something that your body absorbed and then like stored within you somewhere.
Beyond intuition, what are the traits that you think we bring to this AI-driven world that are actually really needed?
Yeah, I joke that either we're all going to become IT managers and Well, we're going to have to operate like all these little AI agents that operate and automate certain types of processes in business, or we're all going to have to become AI entrepreneurs, at least until like maybe OpenAI develops the artificial general intelligence that just takes over all the jobs. I don't know. But in the near term, what you're really starting to see is the startup world is booming right now. And people with ADHD, I mean, I think they're just drawn to being founders. There was like a statistic between like 50 or 60% of founders probably have ADHD, and I could see why. I think it's also true for product managers as well. I mean, you see things differently. You connect the dots in ways that other people can't. Like, I remember this one time, and this is one of those weird things that my brain's been able to do, and I couldn't figure out how. I was at a networking event and I met this guy from a healthcare tech startup, and he was just telling me a little bit about what the product's doing. And he's like, yeah, but we're kind of trying to rethink our strategy a bit. And after I heard about what the company does, what their target users were, their marketplace, I was like, well, why don't you do blah, 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 blah. And he's like, oh my God, that's amazing. We literally landed on that after like 9 to 10 months of trying to bake in our own strategy. And I just like came up with it in just minutes. And there was this other time where we actually had this kind of consulting project with waste management during my time in business school. And I was paired up with a bunch of marketing people. So they came at it this like big marketing campaign lens, like they wanted to do things with the Boy Scout. But there was something in me that just felt drawn to that experience of you standing in front of a recycling bin. And this is back when like recycling bin labels were gigantic and long and had like all this running text. It had the exact codes of the exact type of plastic that you're allowed to put in there. I mean, who reads that? And that was so frustrating of an experience for me that I really felt like there was something there, but I could never really quite clearly convey that to my partner, my teammates, to incorporate that into the actual research report. I didn't know how exactly. And then when we gave the presentation to waste management and their leadership, and we finished our official presentation, I finally just like, I couldn't code it in anymore. I just blurted out, hey, what if you tried simplifying the recycling bin labels to something like cans, bottles, paper, things that, people actually understand, so that we're not reading all this crazy text. And sure enough, like the very next year on campus, I actually saw this recycling bin waste management made out of cardboard that had like simplified language on the side that just like cans, bottles, and paper. So I don't know, somebody in that team might have like taken that suggestion and ran with it. And so these days, whenever we walk by a recycling bin and it's like got that simplified label, I point it out to my husband. I'm like, I feel like it has something to do with that. And I mean, it's bizarre, right? And I feel like that's the kind of thing that your brain is able to do. There was this article in ADHD. It was a feature on women specifically, and especially women with ADHD apparently have like crazy good intuition. And it's hard to explain to people how we got there, but it's more like we have what they call bottoms up processing. Yeah, like we're able to just like connect these different things. We see the mind map and then boom, I've arrived here in a way that looks completely alien to people who have, I don't know, sequential thinking. I don't know what that looks like. This is just the way my brain works, but it's something that I think we need to lean into more of, because that's where a lot of great products can be found, where a lot of great insights can be made, and that can lead to a lot of success in pretty much any area of business. And I lean into the entrepreneurship side because that's where it's the most visible. I think that people with ADHD, granted, yes, we do have to manage the downsides, but not only are we empathetic and we're probably likely going to be good at those collaboration skills and empathy skills that are going to become more of our job in the future when AI automates all the routine, tedious work. But we're probably also going to be the people who are going to figure out, what do we do with this AI and how do we actually like use it in a way that is actually useful and hopefully, makes money for the business. That's what everybody's trying to do right now, is just trying to figure out, like, what do we use AI for? How do we transform our business? How do we find opportunities? Like, hey, I know a bunch of people who have really great ideas. And if you want to tap them for consulting or to like generate a brainstorming session, I'm sure a lot of people with ADHD could come up with a bunch of things that are grounded on really cool, insightful recollections, and that it could actually potentially transform an industry. Who knows?
I think that intuition is also what hurts us in school, because so much of it is you need to show your work. And often we don't know where it came from, but it's the right answer, right? It's and sometimes it's not the right answer, but it's actually a better answer. I tell the story all the time that my son was going through testing. He was 9 years old. And the tester was like, well, he makes a lot of mistakes. She said, for example, this one. And Marcus, my son, was sitting right there. And she said, Marcus, The question was, is milk pink? And you said yes. And he looked at her, he's 9, and he's like, because milk can be pink. Haven't you ever had strawberry milk? So it was just, he went beyond what milk normally is,
Yeah.
and pulled from, yeah, I have had that experience. So I completely agree with all of it. And that's what you always hear about when the talk is around AI and all these jobs are going to be lost. Well, where we can stand out are soft skills. And many of us, that's where we really excel. So you mentioned experiencing a moment of synchronicity that changed your understanding of intuition, attention, and love. Can you walk us through how you arrived there? What happened?
Here we go. I've been struggling with telling the story over and over again because it was just so messy. So for people who don't know what a synchronicity is, it's this coincidence that happens, but it's also like deeply psychologically meaningful. It was coined by Carl Jung. He was a psychotherapist, and I think at one point he worked with Sigmund Freud. He was trying to get through to this one patient. It was a woman who was very left brain, very rational. And he just knew that he couldn't unblock her if she wasn't willing to just release some of that and be willing to kind of tap into her intuition more. And as he's having this thought in his head, she starts sharing with him this dream she had the previous night that somebody handed her something and it was shining. And she was really perturbed by it. Like she came into that session a little bit disoriented. And just at that moment, Carl Jung hears a tapping on the window. And he goes over there, he opens the window, he grabs what it is, and he hands it to her. And it's this gold iridescent scarab beetle. And he's like, here it is. He gives it to her. And that's like when her world kind of cracked. And he said, well, we were finally able to dismantle her defenses. They finally started making progress. And something similar kind of happened to me. It was during a summer where I was going through a lot of questioning about where I wanted to go in terms of my career. I didn't quite know exactly how to navigate it. And I had also, at the same time, I had just discovered The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho and had just been so inspired by his work and the way they talked about like this deep intuition about how the universe wants you to go after your personal legend, fulfill it. And I feel like that kind of gave me this courage because I was having this difficulty with accepting the idea that I had to get off that train track of follow this path. I was going to do the whole MBA and go to management consulting like everybody else. And then I wanted to see this like other one. And that book kind of gave me some inspiration. And I was doing a lot of meditation and I was thinking a lot about love and connection at the same time because I was kind of I was developing a crush at the same time. And all these things are just happening all at the same time. After some point, though, after I had discovered synchronicities, I started noticing more and more of them in my own life. And it started off being something like just really interesting. Like, oh yeah, cool. Carl Jung and I have both the same birthday. Like, how neat. And then there were just more and more of them up until a point where I started getting really scared. At one point, I was rereading The Alchemist. And there is this passage in a book where there's a drawing of a scarab. And right above it says, Egyptians believe scarabs are a sign of God. And at that same moment, my friend calls me outside to the garden. He's like, look at this bug I found. And there is this type of scarab beetle like lying on the ground next to him. And these things were actually frightening me because it's one thing to say, develop an internal compass, a personal philosophy with which you can navigate the world. But it's a whole nother thing to feel like the universe is talking to you. And that made me feel, quite honestly, I felt a bit crazy. I even felt like I was excommunicated automatically from the kind of people I was hanging out with, like all these startup founders, STEM majors, computer scientists. And I could just feel as if I was just losing my tribe just because of having this experience and having nobody to talk to. But just as I was having my freak out moment, I had remembered that I had previously scheduled a lunch appointment with a friend of mine. He's also a startup founder and an engineer, but he was also a Buddhist. And I thought, maybe he'd be open to hearing me out, but I was so scared. So on the days leading up to our lunch, which was on a Wednesday, I had started noticing something else. A pattern had started emerging. Some people in my close circle had started wearing black. And the only reason I noticed it was that one friend I have always seen in a light color shirt, never anything darker than like a light blue shirt. And so one day he was just wearing pure black. And I was like, what the heck? And that stood out to me. And then I remembered that the previous day, the person I was having a crush on was also wearing black. And so when I saw this pattern, I thought, okay, if I go to lunch tomorrow and my friend is wearing black, I'll take that as a sign from the universe. I'll make a bet with you, universe. If my friend's wearing black, then I will sit down and tell him this crazy story that I needed to get it out, but I truly felt like I couldn't talk to anyone about. So I get to lunch, and there he is sitting there in a black shirt. And I'm just like automatically, no, absolutely not. I'm still not doing this. And so, I'm just going to have a normal lunch and everything's going to be fine. And so, we sit down, we order tea, and he had to like take a call. So he steps out. And when our teacups come, his comes on like this plain ordinary white saucer, and mine comes on this like really detailed ornate saucer with all these like images on the outside. It looks religious. There's a guy holding a golden sword or something. I'm like, oh god, is this something like is this something spiritual here? And in the middle of the saucers there were kawa, which I look up while my friend's gone, and I find out that it's the word for the coffee that Arab mystics used to drink in rituals. And there's even a state called ideal kawa in which you are able to communicate with the divine and receive revelations. So I'm like, all right, fine, universe, you win. So I finally broke down and told him that like that was my, golden scarab moment where Carl Jung handed it to his patient. I'm like, fine, my mind cracked, right? And honestly, he was totally fine with it. And then because he was really into it, he was like, yeah, he is a Buddhist and he finds this stuff really fascinating. And it just broke my silence. And it was so helpful because even though I made no sense at all about anything I was telling him, I didn't have to hold it in anymore. I didn't feel so damn isolated. And he later tells me he literally only has one black shirt, and that was the only thing that was clean that day. He's like, yeah, okay, fine. Universe, just stick it in there, twist it a little bit, right? Like, yeah, you won, all right. I think that at some point after this experience, there was this moment that I had that I've only now realized how significant it was for me. And that was, as I was thinking about love and I was thinking about where I was trying to be in my life, but I was also just reading random things online. And I found out that, wow, it turns out that the possibility of anything existing in the universe, like any matter or materials, any of that actually happening was actually really, really low. It's at 1 out of 1 times 10 to the 123rd or something like that. It's like, if you were blindfolded and you were asked to be able to pick out a specific grain of sand out of the entire observable universe, that is how low of a chance that anything literally exists. And meanwhile, I'm having like these odd synchronicities, these events that feel like they should be highly improbable. And I was tuning in to that energy of intuition and love and consciousness that Julie was talking about in your intuition episode. And somehow I came to this one moment where it felt like this. It felt like, what if love is this energy that is able to affect improbabilities and make those things happen? And what if enough of us are able to tap into that energy where it's not only just about like tapping into your intuition, but also living that life that you were meant to live, to pursue your personal legends, to live authentically, to basically love yourself, really. And if enough of us did it, could we collectively create a force so powerful that it makes the really, really big improbable thing happen? Like, what if that improbable thing was literally making everything else happen? Like the creation of everything that there is. And I found out some other random like Wikipedia search that apparently time is not necessarily always linear. Maybe it's a different dimension. I don't know. But that opened up this possibility to me that, okay, so is it possible that at some point in the future, we actually get there? We actually made it. We get to this point where we've actually figured out how to actually create the kind of world and society we actually prefer to live in. One that is kind and empathetic, where people aren't afraid to go after their dreams, where they're not just being told to, get on this fast track and get a 9-to-5 job and never talk about it again, and are too afraid to speak up about these things that are so important. And what if time, if it's not linear, then what if that means that whatever we made happen in the future has the ability to go back into our past and actually affect what happened before in our, before timeline, because time is not linear. And all of us came to a moment where it felt like, holy shit, we actually made it. If I ever had a religious experience, it was this. It was this moment of awe and love and just pure joy. I actually broke down in tears because I'm an idealist and it's hard. You want to believe in a world that can be better, but everything you see around you, everybody who, talks about the potential of maybe we could fix things with AI or just, have a better future, all act as if this is the only reality we've got. Humans are always going to be this tribal, selfish, POS. And this was one moment where I felt like it was actually possible, and not only possible based on my theory, we actually did it. And the proof is that literally everything exists. That we got to that point when we reached that consciousness, and somehow it reached back over time, and maybe like it literally here we are. And it was, yeah, for me that was like this religious moment. And only years later, preparing for this podcast, that I realized that that moment for me was like this tangible experience of faith that I've never known before, but it's also like my North Star. This is for me. I can't imagine anything else that I want more than to be able to create a world like that. Yeah. And I've talked to other people about AI and stuff, and I always mention these like social problems, right? Because we're all worried, like not just about the job thing, but I was like, what is society going to look like? What are our kids going to grow up experiencing? We have like what, 1 or 2 world wars? Like I've lost count. I don't know. But every time you open up the news and you read all these things, or even read social media, it's just crazy out there, and we're fearing our future, and we feel like we're hopeless and powerless to do anything about it. But we're not. We don't have to just forecast our future. We can create it. And damn it, we should. We're saying that we can create artificial general intelligence, but you're telling me that we can't figure out how to be nice to each other and how to like work things out and live together? That's insane to me.
But the thing about it though, Mushin, is I think we have to do that individually, right? In ourselves and with those around us. And like you said, I've got to believe that people who don't live like that, after just not even a long time, like, how do you live like that? How do you live with all that hate? And how do you live with all that othering? And what is wrong with people just being able to be who they really are? Why do you object with that so much? Because you're not allowing yourself to be who you really are either.
Yeah.
So, and I do think that we, with ADHD, that we are more predisposed to live like that because of our extreme interest, and I think our general optimism that it is always going to work out. Like I always wonder why many of us can just go through all this hardship, education, family, trauma, all of it. And somehow we still come back to, well, if it's going to work out for anyone, it's going to work out for me. You know?
Yeah, yeah. Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah.
I love hearing that. I don't even know what to call it, but the experience that you had that, okay, maybe we have already made it. And so perhaps it's a lot of going back to what we already know and what we know works. So I am curious in what it is that you're creating, the AI tools that you're working on building. Are they specifically for an ADHD brain, or what is it? Can you talk a little bit about what you're envisioning?
Yeah, actually I feel like my work now, like my soul work, is kind of twofold. There's being what ChatGPT told me is a clear-eyed narrator, where you're the person identifying, hey, this is why things feel wrong right now because of these reasons. These are the values that we actually hold, and this is what we actually stand for. Especially if you're trying to buck culture, and it's like, look, I don't think anybody's happy. I'm going to call that out instead of being quiet about it. And that's just like writing that I'm still kind of struggling to get together in pieces. But there's that kind of lays like the foundation to me of like, what does that world look like? And then there's like this tiny piece in that future of, hey, if there's a better future with AI, this is like this tiny piece over here that I can help own and optimize. And what I'm building, I call it Maestro. It basically will take uploads of transcripts, notes, text, whatever you want. If it's a brain dump that you just had in the morning, or if it's a discussion about planning something with your spouse, or a large cross-functional planning meeting for a product launch, put it into the AI, and it's just going to automatically organize things for you. You don't have to figure out like, okay, well, like based on what this person said, I'm going to have to update it in my Jira ticket. I'm going to have to update this planner thing here. No, it's just going to create those already well-proven project management, best practices, artifacts, where it gives you the Gantt table, it gives you the RACI chart of who's responsible, who does what. It gives you like documents that start to pick up on themes, like in threads, like, okay, you're starting to talk about a process in this meeting. We're going to create a document about that, and we're going to update it as we go because things change. And it also just helps you basically not have to worry about doing any of that stuff yourself. It is the type of work that I often have found myself doing when I'm managing large cross-functional launches in big matrix organizations. And that very few people see, but it's also what gives me the ability to actually be that person, human glue for all these other people whenever we have something big to launch. Because if I don't have that, if I don't have the frame of reference of what is the scope that we're trying to actually launch, and oh, by the way, the scope's constantly changing, so I also have to keep track of all these questions and how that's going to impact the timeline. I don't have to do that as much anymore. I can give it to the AI and it can handle that for me. And I don't have to keep track of like who's doing what. I can just, give that to the AI and it'll help track that for me. And so it's these things that mentally are tools that help you structure and organize and like lay out the plan for you that you don't have to do as much of yourself and that you don't have to hold into yourself. Like if you don't do these things like I did back when I didn't have these tools or habits, you're just going to hold it inside of you, and it's just all that stress and tension and sense of overwhelm. You're just getting like flooded with information, like I don't know what to do with this, my brain's checking out, I'm done, right? But when you have a system, you know what to do with it. You're like, okay, this is where this goes, this is where that goes, and like we're good. But that also takes time and energy. Like I have 4 or 5 different software apps I have to like keep updated all one time. Well, now AI can just do that for you. And what my hope is that it relieves some of that, like just constant busyness. ADHD or not, our lives are crazy. One guy mentioned a book, I forgot the name already, where the author suggested maybe we all feel like we have ADHD because life right now is so complicated. There was a time whenever you had a question, you just asked your neighbor because you were living on a farm somewhere. And now it's like, oh, you want to buy a house? Well, here's this paperwork, here's that process, and blah, 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 blah. It's just for like one tiny thing in your life. And that's like that everywhere, everything. And it's already too much for anybody. And I think women especially get the brunt of it, where we're the human glue for whatever group of people we happen to be with, whether we're the moms of the household who are project managing everything, or unfortunately a lot of executive assistants and personal assistants tend to be female. A lot of product operations people who are the people who are expected to do all this stuff for the product team are also female. We do a lot of this very detailed, complicated, stressed out, and underappreciated work. And I want to free people from that. And when you have that space, hopefully that gives you time to actually connect with yourself and start asking those deeper questions you're too afraid to ask or too like busy to ask. Like, am I living authentically? Do I even have time to worry about AI in the future? And now that I don't have to worry about all these things and just keeping everything juggling, I can just put it in this one little AI box and have it like do its thing for me. The product's still super early. I barely got a landing page up right before today, and I'll share the link later. But that's my hope with the product itself, is that it's really more about just giving your space back, giving you back some of that dignity too. So you're not like the human catch-all for all the stuff nobody else wants to organize. And you shouldn't have to do that work. And, you shouldn't have to put that stress on yourself.
So what you're developing, is that just for project managers, or could that actually be used just to manage your life and all of the balls that you're juggling at one time?
Yeah, I kind of feel like a lot of the project management tools and habits I developed at work transition pretty well into my normal life, which you have to be careful, ladies. Like if you end up becoming the project manager in your relationship, like guess what, right? But it's a very similar kind of problem. You have all this information. Like right now, husband and I are planning a trip to Japan, and just even nailing down the dates and like getting the hotels. We're like, well, first we got to make sure that we have our PTOs approved. Oh, but before we do that, we got to make sure that we talk to our parents and our families to see if there's anything else upcoming. Oh, but before we do, there's already, you literally have dependencies, and you may as well have a Gantt chart of here's a task and here's what has to happen before that task can be unblocked. And that's where like simple to-do lists don't do it for me. I see all these bots that just, oh, we summarize your meeting and then we give you action items. Like, oh, great, that's cute, but does that actually show the complexity of the work, right? Exactly. And a lot of times things change, it turns out, okay, we're not going to do that one, trip to this one city. So all of a sudden these actions or notes you've created for that one part of the project, no longer relevant. Are you going to manually comb through your entire project artifact folder and then like delete them all? I mean, you could, but how much time and energy is that? And you probably don't, right? So I see it as something that you could really use in life and in work. It is more work-based because that's where a lot of the more super complicated stuff happens, but I don't see why it can't be simplified down into like these simpler forms of projects that, we all have projects of some kind.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I have really started to use AI for. Like I have a health folder and I literally just talk everything into it. My husband started doing the same thing. And it's crazy. Like, I couldn't figure out what is causing this bloating, you know? Because part of our problem is remembering, right? We don't remember, well, what day was it and what was I eating and all of that. So I just start feeding everything into it. And it starts to recognize patterns. And then it starts to process with you. Well, you had dairy on this day, this day, this day. I'm like, really? I did? Like, but it was so accurate. And just the way it was able to put everything together, I finally got to the bottom of it, which I've literally been trying to figure out for probably 3 decades, and it was just, it was caffeine. And I knew I'm a slow metabolizer. I generally cannot drink caffeine, but somehow I had tricked myself into believing that, oh, well, if it's an espresso drink, it's a lot less caffeine and it's mixed with milk, like in a cappuccino. I can do that. And I remember being so sick. We were in Prague, so sick the whole vacation. We were in Prague and Germany, and I couldn't figure out why. And then I started feeding all this stuff to AI, well, what was causing it? Just like pain in my stomach. And we started, pulling it all together. And then I was like, oh my gosh, that explained why I was so sick in Europe. And I thought it was because I was eating too much rich food, which was probably part of it. 4 o'clock, cafe and kuchen. So eating sweets with more coffee. But it really wasn't the sweets as much. That didn't help, but it was the caffeine. And once I got rid of all of the caffeine, even decaf, all of a sudden I felt great. So I wouldn't have been able to figure that out without AI. It just kept asking me questions, and I have no problem talking into it and telling it stuff. It's then if I have to keep notes on all of this and then try to organize the notes and pick apart the notes, I'm just not good at that, in that particular instance. But AI was so good. So
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm a huge believer of it. And so the whole idea of literally I could put my whole life in there and have someone else, it's almost like you've got a partner that you can process all this with. And the partner, their only reason for being here is to make you feel better and be better, you know? And we don't have that kind of person. I don't care who it is.
Yeah, it has a lot of context too. Like, I remember things that most people's brains don't have the capacity for. And yeah, it's super helpful.
Long term too, right? And then make even more connections, which we tend to be good at. But for things like that, when it's your everyday life, you just lose sight of it. So I am curious, you clearly have really made AI work for you and your life. What do you think is there one thing that you could recommend to women who are listening to this podcast, something that they could do to make their life easier? And I'm talking about women with ADHD. Is there something that has really helped you that you use every day?
With AI specifically, or in general, habits, either way.
I'm talking about AI.
So there is something that I'm doing similar to what you're doing, which is you have your folder, and this is where you kind of like dump the daily reflections, and you're able to kind of see a journal log and past patterns. I've actually been using AI in the same way that I intend to use with my product once I get it all hooked together, where I ask it to generate for me the RACI charts of who is responsible based on all these notes, or I will narrate to it like, hey, I just had this meeting with so and so, and this is what the thing said, and I gotta do this. I've also started having it generate for me the follow-up emails, because there's something about writing emails that I just absolutely hate. I don't know why, but I know what I have to do. I know who needs to get this email, what I need to say, but I'm like, but please just write it for me, and also write out the agenda for whatever meeting. I just want to be able to copy and paste it in there. So these are all like little things that I'm hoping that the product can kind of do for you seamlessly, because otherwise you can technically do all this in ChatGPT, and hey, maybe ChatGPT will take over all our startups. But until then, I'm just going to play around with my idea until then. It's that you do kind of have to prompt it. You're going to have to tell it, okay, this is exactly how I want it. Redo this part, right? But I found it super helpful with projects at work, and even with Japan trip planning. I've thrown my itinerary wish list at the AI, like, hi, I have these preferences. This is when I want to get up. This is when I want to have dinner. And I want to eat all these things. Make sure that there's a spot that I can go to for any of these things I want to try out while I'm in Japan. It just blew my mind. Throughout this entire itinerary, day by day, it fit my preferences and did all this research for me. And
Well, it learns all about you, right? So again, this is your personal assistant that literally their whole mission in life is to help you.
Yeah, careful with the data, but yes.
Well, that's what my son, I use it so much. We were just in New York City, and my son, I don't know what I fed it. I fed it something. We were trying to figure out what to do, and I fed it, and he looked at me, and he's 23, and he goes, "Mom, AI is going to know everything about you. Aren't you worried?" And I'm like, "No," but sometimes I think, should I be worried?
Yeah, I met somebody at Cohere who it's like an AI competitor. Their value prop is being able to do private AI so that they don't have access to your data even if they wanted to. There's no way for them to if you set it up in a certain way. And he told me, yeah, I'm in the valley a lot and they're running out of data to train these AIs on. Like there's only so much internet data. He's like, what's going to stop OpenAI from just starting to train its model off of your data? And for companies, that is a huge risk. For individuals, I'm like, I think I was already there when I was giving Google all my information just to make my life easier as a personal. Like I kind of like it. I mean, I know that privacy is definitely an issue, but it's just so damn convenient, and it just yeah, I've made that deal with the devil already. But yeah, I for some reason I haven't yet personally found that one AI assistant that does everything. Like ChatGPT is just usually my go-to because it's usually the best. They're the most well-funded, so they're the ones who are cranking out the most training in anyway. And just finding ways to use ChatGPT has been really the most helpful ways to use AI rather than like the tool itself. Yeah, so I highly recommend doing what you're doing, like creating folders, right? But start doing that with your projects. Do try to get it to create Gantt charts and timelines and help you keep on track of things, so you don't have to use that in your actual like manual to-do list or having to like update that yourself. It absorbs context really well. I think that for people with ADHD, I was going to say that maybe it can help you stay organized if you use it consistently. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have. You can cut that out if you want. Like, I don't really know if there was too much more I can add to that. Oh, but there is one tool that has consistently gotten a lot of love, and it's called Granola. It is a meeting transcription note taker tool, but what it does take notes for you. But what it will do is if you start typing notes yourself inside of your note-taking template, it will focus on that topic because it realizes, oh, this is the thing you're actually interested in. Let me go and make sure that when the AI generates the formatted, refined notes that it's focusing on that topic. I haven't used that feature specifically myself as much, but I know people who really love it and really love being able to just chat with their notes afterwards and be like, hey, what do we talk about from this and that? But yeah, in terms of daily AI tools, I'm mostly a ChatGPT go-to person. You can play around with different models like Perplexity or Claude, but they all kind of generally do the same things. They're just sort of optimized for different use cases. Yeah.
Anthropic and Claude, I understand that they're kind and they're good people. And I'm trying to make the break and trying to go over there. But I've literally spent, what, 2+ years training Chat GPT that I'm like, oh, I don't know if I can do it.
It's yeah, you don't have to use it for everything. It's what Claude does really well is writing things. The other day, I wanted to create a transcript based off of a product launch. I didn't want to use my actual meeting notes. I felt like a violation of corporate data, but I was like, okay, I want this to sound realistic. People cutting into each other, half-formed sentences, processes we don't even know about, like huge cross-functional team, corporate jargon, all that stuff. It did a great job. I tried the same thing in ChatGPT. It did not quite get it right. It really just wasn't as realistic. So Anthropic's really good at writing. So for sure, try that out for certain use cases. Sometimes I have like 3 different AIs going at the same time. It just depends on the problem you're trying to solve. ChatGPT is pretty good at logic, but sometimes I feel like when it comes to doing internet searches, maybe like Perplexity is a little stronger at that. For now, everything changes every few months, so who knows?
Absolutely. Okay, so this was a fascinating conversation. I want you to tell us, Mushin, where can people find you if they want to know more about you and what you do?
Yeah, so easiest way is finding me on LinkedIn. If you type in my name, I'm pretty much the only person who will pop up with that name. I also have my website, mushinli.com. And if you're interested in Maestro, the website for Maestro PM is maestropm.ai. It's still pretty early, but if you'd like to sign up for the email, I'll let you know when it's ready to go.
Wonderful, wonderful. So Mushan, thank you so much for spending time with us here today. It was such a pleasure to meet you and have this conversation.
Tracy, it was so great to get to meet you. Honestly, you were one of my personal heroes and you helped me so much personally. So I'm just really glad to be here. Appreciate it.
Mushan, thank you again. And thank you all for spending time with us. And that is what I have for you for this week. So if you like this episode with Mushan, please let us know by leaving a review. Our goal is to change the conversation around ADHD, helping as many women as we possibly can learn how their ADHD brains work so that they too may discover their amazing strengths. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll see you here next week.